Good evening, Bahamas. This is NB12 broadcasting from Cable 12 Studios on Robinson Road. Here's what's making news tonight. NIB Chairman Gregory Moss fired. What's next for the National Insurance Board? We'll tell you how much it will cost to establish a national lottery. Bahamians encouraged to register now for this month's referendum. Plus, the Junkanoo Corporation breaking in more money than previous years. Those stories and much more on the way. I'm Nakia DeVoe, and NB12 starts right now. Thanks again for joining us here at NB12. After months of controversy, NIB Chairman Greg Moss lost his job last night, with his public statements against the Prime Minister being the final nail in the coffin. Though Moss still professes support for the Prime Minister and the PLP, there are many questions left in the wake of his termination. Now that Prime Minister Perry Christie has fired National Insurance Board Chairman Gregory Moss, the question in the minds of many is what's next for NIB. Minister of National Insurance Shane Gibson told NB12 today that the Prime Minister has not yet made any decisions about who will replace Moss, but he said this is something that would be up for consideration early next week. Gibson pointed out that NIB has a deputy chairman, Bernard Evans, and the board will continue to function as normal. Gibson says he also intends to meet with the board soon before a new chairman is appointed. He says NIB will function without Moss. Opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis agreed, but questioned whether the entire board should be dismissed.
One man does not make up an organization, and therefore organizations can go on. That is true. But as I've said, I have questions about the integrity of that board, which came out in full support of Moss. How could a board come out completely endorse an individual and endorse him staying when men of any integrity or men of any professionalism know that once an investigation is occurring, individuals who are being investigated should be removed from those premises while the investigation is going on? The board saw nothing wrong with that, and therefore I have concern with that board.
News of the firing spread like wildfire last night after Gibson released a statement after 7 p.m. that Moss's appointment was revoked with immediate effect. Before Moss was fired, Prime Minister Perry Christie wrote to him on Wednesday requesting his resignation, claiming that Moss had shown, quote, disregard for the kind of collegiality, mutual respect, and sense of collaborative endeavor that are essential to the governance of our country. In a lengthy statement in which he suggested the Prime Minister had told an untruth regarding his possession of an NIB-issued credit card, Moss also suggested that the Prime Minister and Minister Gibson had failed to properly defend him against allegations made by now suspended NIB Director Algernon Cargill. Christie fired Moss after he refused to resign. Moss's response letter stated, "As to your request for my resignation, I must respectfully decline, as the offering of the same by me would be tantamount to an admission by me that I have done something in the discharge of my duties as chairman which warrants my resignation." Minnis said he supports Christie's move to fire Moss, but said it's a bit late, and stressed that the Free National Movement had been calling for Moss's removal from day one.
The fact that the Prime Minister dismissed him today, I am not surprised. The Prime Minister has a record of being very, very late. He is known as late again. So occurring 2 months later than it should have.
Meanwhile, attorney Alfred Sears, who represents Cargill, is seeking leave from the court to commence proceedings to address what their side views as the violation of a court undertaking agreed to by the parties on December 3rd. The parties agreed not to speak publicly to the substance of the matter before the courts. In a statement on Tuesday night, Moss went into great detail about the allegations against him and defended himself. Now, despite the latest round of controversy connected to NIB, Moss has pledged his continued support for Prime Minister Christie and the Progressive Liberal Party. He is expected to take his seat in Parliament as usual when the House meets on Wednesday. Here's what Minnis had to say about that.
I'm not getting in PLP business. That's their business.
While government stands to gain tens of millions of dollars each year if Bahamians vote yes to the regulation and taxation of web shops, as well as the establishment of a national lottery. However, government would have to spend quite a bit of money before it can make any. Days after Prime Minister Perry Christie revealed that this month's gambling referendum would cost over $1 million, Obi Wilchcombe said he expects the establishment of a national lottery to cost just as much, if not more. He also explained just how long it would take to establish it. Vonig Toot has the details.
If most Bahamians vote in favor of a national lottery on January 28th, Minister responsible for gaming Obi Wilchcombe estimates it would take government about a year to establish it. Another important question is how much would it cost? He says they're looking at 7 figures.
I think it'll be no less than about $1 million plus. It'll certainly exceed $1 million to set it up right, because you're talking about technology alone, the monitoring of that, and so that requires a lot. And then, of course, the persons who are going to manage it. And again, we come back to the fact that you'll have to have agencies all over the country. You can't have a national lottery and leave out some of the islands. If it's national, it's national.
However, Wilchcombe says if government gets a return on its investment, the lottery would eventually pay for itself. The annual tax intake on web shops could range anywhere from $15 to $40 million. However, it's unclear how much government would stand to gain from a national lottery. Depending on how it is operated, Wilchcombe believes it could be millions of dollars a year.
A national lottery can, if it's a daily payout, then you might not get large sums on a daily payout. But if it's a monthly payout, it's how it's done, the aggregate could be so high you can end up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. That will then take you to a point where you're talking millions a year.
These are questions he soon hopes to be able to answer more definitively by reviewing various models and speaking to officials from the United States Embassy. The tourism minister says it would take 12 months to set up because they want it done right.
I think it'll take much longer than getting the web shops, I think, because that requires a whole different kettle of fish. It requires a whole different system to be set up. And then, of course, the government will have to decide whether it's going to be government-run on the one hand or if it's going to be run by the private sector. I do think in the first instance it might be government. So that will take a longer process and a longer preparation, maybe a year from now or so, I think, to do it correctly.
Though government would initially oversee a national lottery, Wilchcombe says successive governments have been approached in the past by private companies interested in running a national lottery in the Bahamas. He believes that interest still exists.
Throughout the Caribbean, you have many non-Caribbean people who run lotteries in some jurisdictions. The point is, it's a big business. The truth is, in the United States of America, we spend about $2.5 billion annually, Bahamians, $2.5 billion annually we spend. Now, how much of that goes into lottery? How much of that goes into purchasing tickets?
Wilchcombe believes that about 50% of Bahamians would take part in a national lottery if established. He says it's also important to factor in the millions of tourists who visit our shores each year and might also be interested in purchasing lotto tickets if they're available to them. These are all things he says government must consider in the coming weeks. Reporting for NB12, I'm Vonig Toot.
While Bahamians are getting ready to cast their yes or no votes, Acting Parliamentary Commissioner Sherlyn Hall said preparations for the web shop gaming and national lottery referendum are going well, and they anticipate a smooth voting process. Here's Celeste Nixon.
According to Parliamentary Commissioner Sherlyn Hall, since Governor General Sir Arthur Folkes signed an order of referendum on Wednesday, there have been a significant number of people registering to cast their ballot for the first time.
While Hall could not give an exact number, he said hundreds of new voters have registered. National Security Minister Dr. Bernard Nottage, in a national address Wednesday, revealed the hotly anticipated questions to the gambling referendum. The two questions are, do you support the regulation and taxation of web shop gaming, and do you support the establishment of a national lottery? As noted earlier this week by Nottage, Hall said voter registration closes for the upcoming referendum on January 10th. This is also the deadline for submitting forms that allow for overseas voting. Overseas voters will cast their ballots in the advanced polling on January 21st.
This time around, the same provisions we used in the May 7th general election, we will use in the referendum. So students who live abroad will be given the opportunity to vote in this referendum. The overseas voting will occur provided students who are on the register must complete the Form J. And that Form J will say the country where you're studying, university, and you must produce, along with the Form J, some evidence, some proof that you are a student at such and such a university. And then we will put you on an advanced vote register and allow you to vote at the embassy on the 21st of January.
Hall said the only procedural changes to the referendum from the May 7th general election is instead of using wooden voting booths, cardboard booths will be used instead. He said indelible ink and pencils will still be used, as well as the same polling stations that were used in the previous election. Hall also explained what to do in the event voters lost their voter's card.
Those who've lost their voter's card, as I told another agency earlier, the policy is to bring in a police report. You must report that the card has been lost, police report, and come to us and we'll give you a replacement card. However, if the police report takes long to obtain, once your name is on the register, you can come to us and vote with a passport, because we will have the carnival at the station with a photograph of you, but your name must be on the voter register.
As per the amendments to the Referendum Act, Hall noted the minister will appoint 3 observers per polling station, 1 to represent the no vote, 1 to represent the yes vote, and another independent observer. He said no party colors would be worn, as this process is non-political.
With a 91% voter turnout in the last general election, Hall said he anticipates a good showing on January 28th.
Most of our general elections have always been around about 90%. We anticipate a good turnout this time around because I believe people are very interested in what goes on in the country. So people will come out in full force to cast their opinion. I don't want to say what the turnout would be, but we expect a good turnout in this referendum.
Hall said a training session will be held for presiding officers this afternoon. Anticipating no problems, Hall said he expects this democratic exercise to go smoothly on Referendum Day. Reporting for NB12, I'm Celeste Nixon.